Hi, everybody. Welcome to Discover College Soccer. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Coach Keri Sanchez from Colorado College. Welcome, Coach.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Wow, thank you for being here, especially kind of as in the early parts of the season. I know you're busy, so I do appreciate that the time. Um, and I'm going to phrase this first question here, a little differently, just because I get it from folks. Now that you and I are talking in September. You're in the thick of your season, so how much recruiting are you and or your staff really doing right now as opposed to December and beyond?
Yeah, so this part of our recruiting is basically trying to keep in touch with athletes that we've identified over the spring and summer. We're not out watching games as much right now. We may get out to a few local games here and there as seasons get rolling, but yeah, you're correct. The recruiting is a little bit different when we're in the thick of it, especially September, October, where again, a lot of it's more email. Phone calls, and we actually just had an ID clinic this weekend.
Oh,
So that
okay.
was one way that we could still reach out and get to see some of the players that might be interested in us.
Okay. And when you say keeping in contact with players, is that juniors and seniors, or mostly seniors, or mostly juniors, or how does that work?
Yeah, so at this point, mostly juniors.
Okay.
Our 23 class is mostly filled, but not all the
Okay.
way. So it's a handful of 23s and a whole bunch of 24s.
So, and that leads me to my next question. So you're locking in a good deal of a class by the end of when those folks would be juniors, right? Kind of in that summer time frame is my guess.
Yeah, so usually, yeah, you're finishing up your class usually about a year ahead of
Okay.
when they'll actually attend.
Okay.
Which-
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, it's just because I've talked to over 80 coaches, right? All levels, men's and women's, and
Mhm.
everybody's just slightly different. But yeah, from a D1 women's perspective, that tends to be where we hear it. But I always like to make sure folks understand that, that's not the case for an NAIA school, perhaps, or
Right.
obviously junior college is definitely different. So, what as a D1 school, how many inbound contacts would you say you get, in a typical month of new people reaching out, interested in the program?
Yeah, so that fluctuates a little bit, but prior to a tournament on those times, we're probably hearing from maybe 50 to 100 new people
Okay.
potentially.
Yeah,
Which then, like that, at the beginning of a recruit cycle, then it goes down.
sure.
This is my first kind of go around at Colorado College, but for my previous schools I've been at, you'll get anywhere from a database of maybe 400 to 600 athletes in a given year
Okay. Per class?
per class.
Okay, wow, that's a big
Yeah.
number. Well, when it comes to, okay, you let's say you get, 400 emails. How do you sift through them? Where are you focusing your efforts in terms of your recruiting time, whether that's tournaments, what are some of those hot tournaments you got to make sure you're at? Kind of where's your focus lie?
Yeah, so we try to respond to everybody because I think that's one of the hardest parts with the recruiting process from the player standpoint is that they just don't get any response back, so they don't really know.
Right.
So we do try to respond to players as much as we can. But to be in D1, obviously ECNL has probably the highest percentage of players that move on to that highest level of college soccer. But we also are looking at the GA and some of those other leagues when we can.
Mhm.
It's just as you know, it gets a little bit crazy tournament time season, and you can only be so many places. But so we do focus probably a little bit more on the ECNL, a little bit GA. But now that the new E64 is going to kick off, we're going to have to keep an eye on that because I think there's good players at all of those different levels. It's just kind of uh, where can you spend your time and find the most, get the most
Sure.
bang for your buck,
Sure.
basically, which is why you see so many coaches at the ECNL events.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you mentioned ID camps, so I'm guessing ID camps pretty big part of your recruiting portfolio as well. How many of those do you do? Are they fairly big, fairly small? How do you like to run your camps? And do you guys do other camps of other schools or some of the for-profit camps at all?
Yeah, so I do. I really enjoy the ID camps because that obviously shows that that player is committed and really interested in your school because they can only pick so many ID camps to go to. So they've made that initial investment to come to you. I like to keep them small because I want to get to know the players that are here that have made that effort to get here. Right? It's time, it's money, and they're spending a ton of money out of other places. So we try to keep it 30-ish players or less So like I said, when they leave there, I know their name and I know who they are, and I can remember a play or two or something about them that when they were here. So yeah, and then we do occasionally work a handful of other camps, depending on where we might have coaching colleagues or friends or whatnot. But typically, the tournaments that we go to or the events plus our ID camps are where we probably recruit the most out of.
Okay. In terms of whether it's at a camp or watching a showcase or something, kind of what's your hierarchy of things that you're looking for in a player that whether it's on the field attributes or off the field stuff, kind of what checks the boxes for you in your recruiting?
Yeah, so we're at a high academic school, so work rate is one. So that's on the field. Obviously, they're mobile. They're wanting the ball. They're playing both sides of the ball, offense and defense. They seem connected and engaged for the whole game. And then off the field, what does that look like? Right, they're in challenging courses in their high school, and they're getting decent grades in those classes. Because that shows they can time manage. Obviously, a busy soccer with hard level classes. That means they'll be fairly successful at our school. The other things on the field, right? They have to have a certain athleticism and a certain technical base in order to compete at the Division I level. So they have to basically be able to do the basics. Can they play with both feet? First touch is fairly consistent. We're not looking for perfection, but they've got to be consistent. And then there's got to be an athletic quality to them. They don't have to be the fastest player on the field, but maybe if they're not as fast, they're quick, they're agile, they're really good on the ball, or their soccer IQ helps speed up their play. Because I think that's the biggest thing I try to tell club players when they're jumping from club to the college level is it's the speed of play and the physicality. Right? Speed of play incorporates just the team runs faster physically, but then they move the ball faster. Right. And they're just bigger kids, especially if you've only grown up playing in your age group. So say you're an 06, you're now going to play with 02s.
Mm-hmm.
That might be fifth years, 03s, 04s, 05s. And if all you've ever seen is the 06 and you show up and now you're playing against this 02 who's 5 years older than you, you're like, oh, wow, this is a whole nother level.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in terms of having a recruit come visit and everything, how for you specifically at your school do you work your unofficial and official visits? Do you do a lot of official visits or mostly unofficial? How does that work for players?
Yeah, so that's dependent on the player, right? So we target a few players that we're going to offer official visits to. We don't have the budget to offer official visits to everyone, so that is definitely a right you earn based off of us getting to see you play 2 or 3 times and thinking that you are kind of be targeted as kind of an impact player for us. But we do have unofficial visits too. We've had several of those, especially again because we got here a little bit late, so we were still trying to secure a 22 and a 23 class pretty late in the process, and so we had a lot of unofficial visits that we did with players that were still looking for homes, right?
Yeah. And then last question I've got for you on just again on the recruiting front is how often are you talking to club coaches, high school coaches, other college coaches to really kind of fill in the gaps on certain players or learn about new players and that sort of thing?
Well, and that goes back to that previous question when you asked off the field, right?
Yeah.
Some of those things we look for is how they treat their parents after a game. How do they treat their coach if their coach is trying to give them some advice on the field? I've seen a player throw up her arms and talk back to her coach, and you can see all the coaches on sidelines crossing that name off. Also, what happens when their teammate does something great? What happens when their teammate doesn't do something great? How do they support that teammate or encourage that teammate? And I always like to watch goal scorers, right? And then if you're the one that scored or one of your teammates scored, how do you behave? How do you act? Are you that positive force on your team?
Yeah.
Yeah, we look at a lot of those different elements, the kind of those character type things, right? Because we're looking for kids that are going to fit into our culture. So that's where the club coaches and high school coaches and college coaches that may know that individual because maybe they're from that region or that state that will get to talk to somebody so they've seen, because sometimes you don't get to see the player in all the different environments. Because I would tell them I'd love to see them winning a game. I'd love to see them losing a game and having to come back. I'd love to see a tight game. I'd love to see all these different things, but you don't necessarily get that on the one day you happen to be there watching them play. So that's why you use those other people that are seeing them on a daily basis. Do they show up to practice on time? If they can't be there, do they let you know? Do they do outside work on their own? Those are some of those things that you can get from the club coach's perspective.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears, talk a little bit more about Colorado College. Now, I've been lucky enough to visit Colorado Springs, so I know of Colorado College, but other folks may get it confused with the University of or other things out there in Colorado. So, besides just what I can learn on the website, I know you're fairly new to the school, but kind of give me some inside scoop. What are some of the awesome things you've seen so far about Colorado College that maybe I won't find just by checking the website out?
Right. So obviously location is great. We're right at the base of Pikes Peak. So if you're a mountain type person, you really love the trails and the outdoor activities that you can do. And we're a smaller school. So if you like that, where you're in classes that, your teacher to student ratio is really small. So you're sitting in class with, 11 to 15 people. So the type of learning you get in that versus being in a big lecture hall, I think is special for us. But we also sit in a big city, right? So we have 500 and it's growing. I think somebody said we were maybe even up to 700,000. We're actually the biggest city in Colorado. So Denver is probably the most well-known, but Denver has the suburbs and is way spread out. Colorado Springs is actually the biggest city. So you get that small school, but in a city, so you have everything you could possibly need in terms of that. And we're also then conveniently located to Denver if you want to do some things there. I think for academic side, we're also on a block schedule, which is super unique because very few schools do it. So it's based on a semester system, but instead of taking 4 classes at once, they take 1 class at a time. And those classes are called blocks. So blocks are 3.5 weeks. And then you get a 4.5 week break, 4.5 day break. And so if you talk to a lot of our student athletes, they love their 4.5 day block breaks. And obviously, if you're in season, the student athletes miss those block breaks. But again, being a fall sport, we are the shortest playing season of the collegiate different seasons. And so our student athletes get to take advantage of most of the block breaks. And so they definitely love that. The other thing that's unique about us, because we're on that block system, is they can study abroad and still be around. So spring season, I know, can get hectic, but they could study abroad, block 5 or block 8. And still be available for all of our spring games. And so that's also unique if you have somebody that wants to do that. And then I think from a college soccer side of things, we're pretty historical. This is the 40th anniversary of NCAA women's soccer. Started back in 1982. Prior to that, AIAW sponsored some things. Colorado College had their first varsity soccer team in 1978 on the women's side. We hosted the first national championship. We didn't actually qualify, but we actually hosted the first one ever for collegiate women's soccer prior to the NCAA. And then in the first 10 years of our existence, we were in the Final Four 5 times and in the final game twice. So we have a huge legacy that we're trying to live up to. And then obviously, as it's gotten, tons more programs have been, think of the word, have been added. So now we're, back in I think the early days, it was 75 to 80-ish teams, and now we're up to 375 plus teams in Division I. It's obviously become a lot more competitive, but I'm hoping to come in here and see if we can get us back to kind of the success that we had in our early years.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know it's a challenging academic environment at Colorado College as well. So how specifically there do your student athletes really balance their studies with their sport commitments? What kind of support systems are there in place? And I guess how does the block scheduling all fit into that as well?
Yeah, so I think, again, the students that choose our school really do like that block system where you're just having to focus on one thing at a time versus balancing maybe 4 or 5 classes. So I think that's one. I do like the time frame of the school. So most classes run 9 to noon. So you know where everybody is at one time. And then noon to 3 is kind of seen as the collaborative time. So professors, office hours typically are in that block. Time to work with your other classmates if you need to. Tutors are available, writing center, all those kind of support systems that you need. And then there's like an activity period that starts after 3. And then typically everything winds up so they have dinner and their evenings kind of free to do work as well. So I think the block system has been set up in a way to help them time manage and help them kind of be successful students in a hard academic environment. We do also have an additional advisor that the athletes get to try to help them making sure they're picking the right courses to have during, especially our competitive season where there's some travel and you're going to miss some class times, making sure you're not in a class that's going to be too hard for you to miss.
So, and that kind of leads me right into my next question. So it sounds like you're, in terms of a typical schedule during the season, that practice times after 3 o'clock, would that be right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
I
then,
usually,
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
typical day. They wake up in the morning, get some breakfast. They're at class 9 to noon. They got some free time, 12 to 3, to either get work done, see a professor, see a tutor, or whatever it might be. Training is usually 3 to 5, 5:30ish if we do some video or scout or things like that. And then their evenings back free again as well.
Okay. Now, in terms of travel, you guys are in the Mountain West, like, there's a little bit spread out. How does that work in terms of your typical cadence in games and missing? Well, does that really require missing classes in that block schedule with that early morning, or how does that work?
So yes, well now the Mountain West has also gone to Thursday, Sunday, which a lot of
Okay.
conferences have gone to. So
Yeah.
that does bring in an additional missed class day, but we try to leave. So if we have a Thursday game on the road, we're going to leave Wednesday after classes. Uh, then Thursday we'll set aside time for them to get their coursework done, or maybe that's where COVID has helped athletes a little bit, because now a lot of professors have lectures that are already pre-recorded, or they're really good at technical side, so they'll let somebody zoom into class. So I think that's going to help us a lot compared to maybe when I was back in school and you just had to rely on a friend taking some good notes and whether or not they were legible. So I do think the Zooming and pre-recorded lectures are really going to help us when we have to now miss an extra class day.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, talk about the team, the soccer side of things. So, is there an ideal roster size that you're trying to hit each year?
So I usually like 25 to 27. I
Okay.
think is a good roster. You want to be able to compete 11v11 in training. A lot of college rosters, you'll carry a third goalkeeper. And then, you always have somebody with an injury or a knock or a pull or something where they might be out. So to give you a few extra bodies in there, and then you have a small group that are still developing, and it gives you a little bit of time to develop those student athletes. So yeah, so I like to try to keep it 25 to 27.
Okay. And then what about your staff? How big is your staff? What role does everybody play? What kind of other athletic department support staff are there that kind of play a role with the team?
Right. So we have full-time coaches. We have myself as a head coach. We have 2 full-time assistant coaches.
Nice.
One of those also trains the goalkeepers. Right now we don't have a volunteer coach, but we could add in a volunteer coach. And we also have a director of ops, part-time director of ops that can help us kind of arrange travel and do some of those administrative things, take some workload off of the coaching staff, which is awesome. Then as a continued support staff, we have a full-time trainer assigned to soccer. And she's great. She's new to us this year, but came from Duke football, and she's been a tremendous addition, as well as we have Cam Davidson that does our strength and conditioning. And then, so those are kind of our 2 main ones that are added to us. And then we have a PT that's also works with our student athletes. So again, we don't have to like ship them off to a PT place if they're needing PT type stuff. We have somebody in-house that can work with them, and he's done a tremendous job, especially with a couple of ours that are coming back from ACLs. So we actually have some great support systems. And then we outsource. We have a sports psychologist that the team works with, a team kind of consultant that helps with the freshmen as they're kind of trying to make that transition from high school and club to college and all of what that entails. We have somebody that's helping with that transition with them, and just another person for them to reach out to if they're struggling, without having to necessarily let the coaches know, but just another resource for them.
No, that's excellent. Well, in terms of resources, are there any kinds of the best way I can put this? What kinds of technology are you guys using in
Oh
terms of
yeah,
whether that's in game or in practice? What kind of how does that kind of mix in
yeah.
everything?
Well, our student athletes wear their GPS units, so we can kind of track. Which for us, the main things we like to get out of that is just total volume that they've maybe run that day. I'd also change of direction. Decelerations is usually what causes the most fatigue and soreness. So you can see if somebody's maybe a high end of those. And then a lot of things with data take time. So freshman year, it's just kind of learning their bodies. And then by the time they're seniors, you can kind of know if somebody's on the verge, or maybe you can red flag them that hey, they've had a lot of volume for so many days in a row or so a week or so, and then you can pull them back a little bit, try to help. Injury prevention is the main reason we're wearing those kind of stuff. Our field has video cameras. So every training's recorded, every game's recorded. The student athletes have immediate access to all of that information. So if they want to go back and see some drill in practice or something that happened, or come to talk to the coaching staff about that, they have access to all the practice and games. Then we also use Instat, which helps break down our video for us. So again, within 24 hours, the players can see all their touches from the previous game. The stats, which I always tell them are probably about 75 to 80% maybe accurate, but again, you can see trends over time. So that's why we're 6 games into the season. And so that was my job this today, is I'm going through the trends, who's trending up, who's trending down, in different key parts of the stats that we think are important indicators of whether or not we're going to be successful.
Okay. In terms of kind of your style of coaching, team style of play, how would you describe that, and kind of just the overall culture of the team as you're kind of getting kicked off in in this first full season for you?
So first, for team culture, we kind of had a culture building meeting, and that was one of the things, is we wanted to reestablish what are the main values that mattered to us, both on and off the field. And I thought the team did great choosing those and also defining them. But we are grit, trust, love, and pride. So those are the big things. So again, when we're doing film or anything, we always have a values part of that film so that they can see how those values live out on the field for us. And then style of play. I'm an attack-minded coach, even though I was a defender by trade a little bit. I love attacking soccer. I'm an American soccer coach for sure, because I'd rather it be 8-7 than 0-0, as long as we're winning. Not that I really want to give up 7 goals, but I think it's just more fun for the fans, right? So an attractive style that makes the fans want to come out and watch you play. So move the ball on the ground, move it quickly, change sides, isolate somebody 1v1, show some creative flair in the final third, put balls in the back of the net. And then I say, from a defensive standpoint, we want the other team to start counting, because they think we have an extra person on the field, because we're just that hard to break down. And it seems like we have so many people around the ball, and how can we do that? So, which comes back to our original main core value of work rate, and grit.
No, love it. Love it. Well, Coach, we've kind of covered a whole lot of ground here, and I do appreciate your time. I don't want to keep it too long, but I always like to end these on the same note, and that's, what didn't we talk about? What did we miss? What else do you want to let people know, whether it's about recruiting, the school, the team, the soccer side, or anything else in general? The floor is yours.
I think from just the recruiting standpoint, right? I think that can be a very stressful process for young players, and they don't get a phone call on that June 15th, or thinking nobody wants them, but just that it's really a self-driven process. And the more effort you put into it, the better outcome you're going to have, and you're going to find that place that's the right fit for you. If you really have that desire to want to play at that next level, you got to put some effort in and sell yourself a little bit. There's a lot of good players out there, but if you find some schools that are really the right fit for you, just continue to keep reaching out and being in touch, and kind of find a way to enjoy that process and try not to be too stressed out about it.
Absolutely. Well, wise words. Thank you, Coach. Really appreciate the time. Wish you the best of luck with the rest of this season, and hopefully you'll be standing atop the podium there at the end of the Mountain West tournament, and we'll see you in the NCAAs.
All right. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.